Whew, here we go. Flying car, sort of.
It's fun, hey?
Because all of a sudden it cuts throttle and I my pants. We normally review cars on this channel.
Non-instrumented testing is what we agreed to,
and you have said that humans are better at something than machines. If you listen to the podcast, you know what I'm talking about. But not today. I'm in Palo Alto. Now I could go that way a little bit and go to one of the big tech companies and learn how to make a new boring app or how to bury the truth and sell more t-shirts. Or I could go into this nearly anonymous looking building where I'm going to learn how to drive, or rather fly, a very interesting vehicle. I'm going this way. That's right, I'm going to be flying this thing. Well, actually the predecessor of this. This is called the Pivotal Helix. I'm going to be flying the development craft they made called the Blackfly. They made and sold about 12 of them, but they were given to people who were early adopters and were giving them feedback on research and development, helping them refine things a little bit. But ultimately, basically the same thing. The Helix is a little bit nicer inside, has a few more creature comforts, Alcantara on some things, a little bit of leather on the seat, but ultimately it's fundamentally the same vehicle. You have 8 electric motors, lots of batteries, lots of wiring, a flight control computer, GPS sensors. It has elevons on the wings, which kind of look like flaps that direct the thrust from those electric motors. And of course, the very cool thing is that it has the wings between the motors. So while the motors provide the lift, once it tilts forward, the wings are actually providing the lift. A helicopter has to exert a lot of energy to stay in the air because the only thing keeping it in the air is that rotor spinning and pulling it up from the earth. An airplane, of course, gets the lift from the wings itself. It's being pulled forward, but that's why you can't take off vertically unless you have a Harrier. This is kind of in the middle. Vertical takeoff, then it moves forward for efficiency. I can't believe this is a real thing, but that's what I'm doing for the next 3 days in Palo Alto, is training to fly this. And hopefully I get cleared to not just take off and hover, but move around the actual flight path. So, time to go to school. Zack has a pilot's license? No, I don't, and I don't need one. Because the Helix Blackfly are considered ultralight aircraft under FAA's Part 103 regulation. Part 103 covers a hilarious, diverse array of aircraft. There's low-powered fixed-wing aircraft, photography drones, balloons, paragliders, even those paragliders where someone has a Briggs & Stratton lawnmower engine attached to their back with a big fan on it. The regulation defines ultralight vehicles in 2 categories, powered and unpowered. A powered vehicle must weigh less than 254 pounds. It's limited to only 5 US gallons of fuel. It must have a maximum speed of no more than 55 knots, and it needs to have a power-off stall speed of no more than 24 knots. The Blackfly weighs 348 pounds, but the FAA gives you weight credits if you have safety systems. So the Pivotal can float, meaning it can land in calm water, and it has a ballistic parachute system. That's what the big red knob is for. Because of that, it gets weight credits back. Part 103 also has a lot of rules about where and when you can fly and what the weather can be. In a nutshell, you are banished to faraway lands, far away from airports and people who don't want your hobby landing on their roof. A customer has to pass Pivotal's training program, which takes 2 weeks or more to complete, and that's after they pass the FAA's ground school. However, my program was going to be a little shorter. I have 2.5 days to go from ground squirrel to flying squirrel. After reading all 184 pages of the manual twice, I'd spend the next 2 days in Pivotal's flight simulator. Kids, tell your parents that Xbox can be useful in the future. I know, watching someone play a video game is like being the last single person in a wedding party. You're just waiting your turn. I'll explain this as quickly as I can. Everything is controlled by a single joystick, but there are 2 of them because some people are left-handed, and also redundancy equals safety when you're up in the air. Training started with learning how to turn the aircraft on, which is a series of buttons, and then I practiced takeoff and landing, over and over and over for hours and hours. After that, I practice flying the racetrack loop that I might get to fly if they think I've played the video game the right way. That means I would take off, fly out half a mile, turn around, come back, spot my landing, and of course, land safely. It's a really interesting sensation, but I have to say, the tuning of the joystick is so intuitive. If you've played video games or flown a drone, having that touch sensitivity feels really familiar. In a helicopter, you have the cyclic and you have the other emergency handle that's not an emergency handle, but it changes things. I tried to hover a helicopter once, it was impossible.
Your controls. Oops. Oh, my controls! You failed the Micro Museo Hover Challenge. What? That happened so fast.
With this, it's all done with one stick, and that is some of the magic that we're getting with the electric motors. So even while I am telling it to go forwards, backwards, rotate left or right, or even lean a bit left and right, the motors are doing a ton of work to keep the craft stable while performing those maneuvers. Even in this video game, with graphics that look like they are from 2005, I was starting to catch the bug of flying. Oh, and the simulator. They built this, engineered it, and basically combined a bunch of different flight softwares to make this thing. And it was incredible. I felt everything from motor failures to wind changes, speed variations, and landings. And as I would learn in the future, it was an essential tool to my education, especially when the vehicle you are going to drive or pilot requires you to be staring at the sky when you take off and land. After 8 hours of VR, I wanted a tour of the factory to see how the real things get made. Nearly everything is made in-house. At one end are rolls of carbon fiber that will be layered over foam and put into vacuum molds. At the other end is where they build the motors. A wire loom with 160 spools of copper winds the wires for their electric motors. There's so much copper in this little piece, it was like holding a 3-pound chopstick. When Pivotal opened in 2011, no one made a motor strong or efficient enough, so they made their own, and they continue to. This current version weighs only 5 pounds, but puts out 25 horsepower. The lithium-ion batteries are stored in the wings. There are 3 flight computers because redundancy is common in aerospace, unless you're Boeing. Smart people can turn the right squares on the periodic table into the most incredible things. Let's get the basic numbers out of the way. The Blackfly and Helix have an 8 kilowatt-hour battery, which gives you a 20-mile range with 20% left in reserve. The range, of course, is influenced by how fast you're going, the mode you're in, headwind or tailwind, and of course, if you are climbing. It can climb or descend at 500 feet per minute up to a ceiling of 5,000 feet if the FAA allows that in your area. But at that point, you'd have to turn around and descend. The top speed is 55 knots in cruise mode, which is when it is angled forward and using the wings for lift. My training schedule wasn't going to permit me to fly in cruise mode, so I would be using forward hover, which flies about half as fast but does use more battery. Like every EV manufacturer, Pivotal hopes battery capacity and density improves, but for now, pilots have to be mindful of the range. Okay, day 2. Today we're running through emergency situations, problems, things like that. Reading through the handbook, I found that there are 3 different warning indicators. There's yellow, red, and purple. Yellow means you might be able to get back to your original launch pad. Do it as quickly as you can, but the thing should fly normally. If a red alert pops up, it means if you can't get back to your prepared landing site right away, you need to look for the closest safe place to land. Make sure it's not going to be on a building or in a river or something like that, but you need to look for immediate touchdown. Purple means you pull the parachute. I hope I don't need that one. As you can imagine, something with this many motors and systems has a lot of indicators, sensors, but also points of failure. Even the viewfinder itself can turn off. But what's great here is that we are going to practice all of those situations. They're going to turn motors off right as I start to take off, because there's a different procedure for that than if it should happen when I'm 100 feet off the ground. They are trying to prepare me and any potential customer of this aircraft for any potential situation that could go wrong, even though most of the things we'll be practicing, they have never experienced in the field or in testing. But I really, really need to do well today, because if I do well today, then on flight day, I get to do more than just take off and hover. So I have to do well, gotta pay attention, I gotta study. But the question that I, and many of you are probably thinking about is, why?
My name's Ken Karkland, CEO here at Pivotal. I spent 13 years at a company called AeroVironment. And AeroVironment is a really interesting company. They've been around for 50 years, a lot of very cool technical firsts. Built the first human-powered aircraft that crossed the English Channel. They contributed immensely to the Mars helicopter. But the core of the company was small unmanned aircraft. This company has been at it for over a decade, building on an idea that its founder had about personal aircraft. He had somehow come to the conclusion that battery technology and motor technology and composite structure technology were in about the right place where you could build something with enough utility, enough flight time, so it'd be interesting. So he decided to prove that for himself and built the very first predecessor to the Blackfly. It was actually called the Skycar Rebel in Ontario. In 2011, became the first person to fly an electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. Well, vertical takeoff and landing frees you of that infrastructure requirement of an airport or an airstrip. Now imagine you create the freedom for you to take off and land on any relatively level patch of grass, 60 feet by 60 feet with no large overhead obstructions. That's tremendously freeing. Now you could actually fly to your friend's, home, provided they live in an uncongested area and it's not, a dense settlement or city, because there are some restrictions on where you could fly ultralights. But with those restrictions, you also have the freedoms of not being a licensed pilot. The biggest driver for electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft having enough range and enough capacity to make them really interesting is the battery technology. The battery technology has been advancing rapidly for the past 20 years. A big driver for that is obviously the electric car industry, which is driving that in a big way. As the higher energy density battery technology has become more mainstream, now it's something you can actually implement in a vehicle that you would sell within some affordable range. It's taken until just about now for it to really be there. And we're finally at a point where that energy density equation is working out well for aircraft that have limited flight time and limited utility. You're not going to see this, displacing jumbo jets for transcontinental traffic anytime soon. This is all about the short distance, near term, within metro, slightly longer term, probably regional transportation will be satisfied by all electric.
I had to ask, why are we obsessed with flying cars?
Probably something everybody daydreams of when they're sitting in bumper to bumper, unending traffic. To be able to realize that freedom of leaving the road and going to where you need to go, that's the dream. That's a dream. A car is a magnificent machine. It's a product of a lot of engineering to make it appropriate for driving on the road at a certain speed for a certain number of miles, give it certain handling characteristics. We've gotten really good at making wonderful automobiles. Aircraft are a completely different set of constraints. And combining the functionality of a road car and an aircraft invariably results in an outcome that is not well suited for either one. So I like to stay away from the term flying car because to me it means you're making some very unfortunate design trade-offs that are going to result in a really crappy car or a really crappy aircraft, but not be good at either role.
After a morning in the simulator for one more refresher course, it was time for the real thing. We got on the highway and headed for the danger zone. Byron Airport, 1 hour east of San Francisco, surrounded by golden fields and wind turbines. It would be hard to crash into anything, except the ground. Before every flight, Christina Menton, who is the COO of Pivotal and the head of flight, took me through the checklist to make sure all the systems were functioning perfectly. I kept saying I could never be a pilot because I could never remember to do all these things. And she kept saying, Zack, it's called a checklist, not a memorized list. Anyway, with that done, there was nowhere to go but up. Holy shit. Okay, first flight, first real flight. Taking off, hovering at 40 feet for 2 seconds, coming back down. I look calm. I'm not. Okay. Commanding ignition. All propellers rotating in the same direction. I'm gonna select my joystick, holding right trigger. Green lights illuminate. Test the elevons, because that's actually how we direct the thrust. Propellers are now turning in flight direction. Check for view screen alerts again. None. Wind. Wind is good. She's giving me the all clear. Area path is clear. Abort criteria. Thumb down and trigger if something goes wrong. Here we go. Holy crap. Oh my god, so many feelings. That's insane.
Nice, yeah.
It's so comfortable because it's just like floating. You're just floating. It's like the weirdest hammock in the world. It's like the most expensive, loudest hammock in the world. I'm sure it's accurate, but it feels like the sim moves backwards more quickly than this does in real life. And it also feels like this descends more quickly with full thumb down than the sim does. When I did full thumb down, it felt like I was falling, and I know it won't, but I went, oh, that's okay. In case AGL goes out, like, I need to know what that feels like.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Woo.
Holy shit, this is insane. I know I keep saying that, but I'm out of adjectives.
That's all right.
Said the writer. The box pattern flight went as planned, although motors got hot quick. Went from 130 to 140 pretty rapidly. It's okay, something to know. Descending quickly. Time for the real flight. The plan is to fly half a mile out, come back, and land in one piece. I'd only be 100 feet up, which seems safe, until you remember it's too low to pull the parachute. You know, they say college prepares you for the real world, and that's somewhat true. I was a communications major, and here I am communicating what might be my final moments. If I need to abort, thumb down, trigger. Propellers are spinning in the optimal direction. Cleared for takeoff. Back and up, rotate, flight, flight. Whew, here we go. Flying car, sort of. Rotate. Full forward. Holy shit. Oh. Temporary AGL error. Okay, that's interesting. That power surge is very scary. It's settling in. Battery 80%. 100 feet above home. So I've got a little tailwind. So it's occasionally cutting throttle because it doesn't need it. Wow. Wow. 100 100 feet up, turning toward the road. This is insane. The view is amazing. Control is just like the sim, moving around a little bit more because of the wind, obviously. This is so cool. I am looking at a bird, not eye to eye. Okay. Parallel to the road. Fighting a headwind now, I can feel it. So I might have to come in a little bit different. Starting my descent. Full descent down. Woo! 100 feet. 90 feet. 88 feet. 70 feet. Motor 64 degrees. AGL error. We got AGL error. AGL error. Descending to 20 to land. I've lost my markers, but I have those. Okay, let's see if auto land works. 19 feet, 16 feet. Approved auto landing. Auto land. Slight headwind. Oh, I'm really against the wind. Man, it's different up here in real life. Holy moly. I had a lot more motor temp ceiling. I think I got nervous, so I landed a little bit quickly, but oh well. Holy shit! Safety first indeed. Wow. Shout out to Michael Faraday for inventing the electric motor and giving this moron the opportunity to fly a craft in the air. Holy shit.
Woohoo! That was a real flight.
That was very real.
So that AGL flickered, that was expected. It was just when you came around the 40 feet mark, when you came in, but it did come back.
Yeah, it did. It did on takeoff, which I was used to from the sim, and I went, all right, and then it did it again. I went, okay, well, I guess I'll just land it.
Perfect.
So I wasn't freaked out, which was great. I just noted it. But then I saw that the wind changed direction a little bit,
Yeah.
and I got a little bit nervous, and I came in, I don't know, the angle's okay, but I should have been facing that way, I think.
It doesn't really make much of a difference. The most important thing is that you ended up on the pad. You had tons of
Technically,
battery,
yes.
tons of motor temps.
First flight, I'm fine. That should be
Yeah,
good.
That was
and
awesome.
we have the track of where you actually flew, and it was exactly on point, parallel with that road.
Really?
Turning in, coming back parallel with the road.
And then, like, the tailwind is crazy
It's fun, hey?
because all of a sudden it cuts throttle and I shit my pants. And it's just like, oh, I don't need to move forward. Like, I was full stick forward, but it just, I guess it lets up because it doesn't need to keep propelling. So it was going, it was like surging.
Yeah, you can hear it.
And then same thing on the way back.
It's exactly why we do one step at a time. You get
Yeah.
used to the new sensations,
Yeah.
And you can feel that she just wants to take off.
Yeah.
So, you transition to cruise and
I bet.
you're going to be
I
flying.
mean, you double your speed
Yeah.
like pretty quickly, right?
yeah.
After charging for an hour and with the sun setting, there was time for just one more flight. But this one would be twice as long. Okay, doing 2 laps this time. Full ascent, full hover. Oh my God. It gets so quiet. And then your stomach drops. It's so much more efficient in forward hover. The quiet scares you. It's terrifying. It feels like the engine's cutting. Because at this height, at 100 feet, I cannot pull the parachute. Minimum parachute height is 152. Wow. Battery 75%, motor temps 56, and chillin'. Oh my God. This is a very special day at this job. Thank you, Road and Track. Thank you, Matt, for meeting Christina of Pivotal. Man, thank you to Pivotal for training me and trusting me. Motors are chilling, 63 degrees. Excellent first lap. The training, really, that's important. Still have a lot of butterflies. I mean, sunset, windmill, this is amazing. Oh man, I want to try cruise someday, being able to bank turn, but this is amazing. And right now it's easy. If you've flown a drone, played some video games, done some flight sim. It's shout out to the gyroscopes, the computing power, all the engineers, and all the work they did to make this feel normal. All right, now we're descending from 100 to 40. My above ground level sensors are working, my radar's working, my GPS is working, battery level is 65%. Got a little fence here, I don't want to hit the fence, AGL there. Coming into land. Center myself with the markers. It's like upside down. Systems on. Approved landing. Go auto land. Auto land. Get ready to kill motors. What just happened? What the hell? This is a day at work? The landing is the craziest part, by far, by far. It is, I've never bungee jumped. I've skydived, but bungee jumping, you do the jump and then the adrenaline wears off and then you're lowering yourself. And this is like that, but all the adrenaline is when you're landing. Holy shit. This was by far the most unique experience I've ever had in a machine. I've been on plenty of commercial flights. None of them take off like this thing. It was like being in a cartoon and stepping in a booby trap. And now I understand why people get pilot's licenses. Before I didn't. I thought you just see the same thing you see from a commercial air flight, but I was so wrong. Being able to take a vacation from gravity by yourself and then see the world the way you want to see it is a life-changing experience. People say that octopi are smart. We have flying machines. However, the Pivotal Helix costs $200,000 and you run out of battery in just over 20 minutes. You can go a lot further for a lot less money buying a used airplane. So who is this for?
People are using this for, obviously for fun.
Yeah.
It's recreation. It's taking off and seeing the world. And as Tim Lum, our first customer, said, he'll take off and he'll fly across hilltops and along mountainsides and along cliff sides, and he'll cover, in a few minutes, terrain that would take him half the day to walk. The tilt aircraft eVTOL aero architecture has all kinds of utilities. So imagine, if you will, if every municipality with an EMT team and a fire department could have an air asset. Do you think they would have an air asset?
Yeah.
I think they would, especially if they didn't need to hire pilots and a maintenance staff and build a hangar. With a vehicle like this, a small-sized town could have their own air assets for doing search and rescue, for being able to get an EMT on site faster when it's a remote location. But if you could just fly there, you could have someone on site in minutes. And then they could learn how to operate the vehicle, not as a dedicated job. Like if you're a pilot, you pretty much are a pilot. That's all you do, right? This is like an additional skill. It's like being a driver. It's been about 50-50, people who are licensed pilots and people who are not licensed pilots. But of the population who are not licensed pilots, most of them have had some connection with aviation through much of their lives.
New technologies are always expensive, as are new aircraft. It's easy to dismiss this as an expensive toy for rich people that have an extension cord, a big yard, and a 22-minute attention span. I'm not qualified to say whether emergency services would benefit from having something like the Helix. If you're an emergency responder, comment below. What I do know is that most people are bad at predicting the future. Just look at BlackBerry. The stability of a multi-rotor aircraft has put flying in more hands than ever. Every year, more people are flying more drones. Vehicles like the Helix might expose more people to the hobby of flight. Technology keeps advancing. What seems impossible or far-fetched today might not be tomorrow.
And remember, always fight your tickets on the Off the Record app available in the Android and iOS store, or go to offtherecord.com/TST.